A billionaire handed his unlimited credit card to a homeless single mother and walked away. Less than 2 hours later, a transaction notification lit up his phone. It wasn't designer clothes. It wasn't expensive jewelry. It wasn't a luxury hotel reservation. It was something that stopped his breath, something that made every assumption he'd carried for 40 years crumble like ash. Instantly, he knew there would be consequences, because in that moment, 28-year-old Monique Harris made a choice that would shatter a cynical man's world and expose a truth neither of them was prepared to face. Before we go any further, if you believe one decision can change 2 lives forever, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to this channel, Nal's Haven, and share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us honestly what you would have done with that card. Now, let's get back to the story. Watch how this moment rewrites everything. Victor Blackstone had stopped believing in human decency a long time ago. At 40, as CEO of Blackstone Technologies, a software empire valued at $8.7 billion, he'd watched brilliant people destroy themselves for equity points. He'd seen colleagues betray decades of friendship for board positions. His Manhattan penthouse overlooked Central Park with floor-to-ceiling windows that cost more than most Americans' homes, filled with contemporary art that appreciated faster than it could be enjoyed. He owned a restored 1967 Shelby GT500, a Tesla Roadster, and a vintage Aston Martin DB5, machines worth millions sitting in climate-controlled garages while he took black cars everywhere that mattered. His Patek Philippe Nautilus could fund a family's living expenses for 2 years. Yet every morning, he woke up feeling hollow, like a man drowning in shallow water. His father, Richard Blackstone, had died 2 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, leaving Victor with billions and one unshakable piece of wisdom that had shaped his entire adult life. Son, the poor will destroy you if you let them close. Give them $1, they'll demand 100. Give them kindness, they'll mistake it for weakness. Poverty breeds desperation, and desperation breeds thieves. Protect yourself first. Always. Victor had carried that gospel like scripture for 40 years. Every charitable donation filtered through tax attorneys who ensured maximum deductions. Every philanthropic gesture calculated for publicity return and brand positioning. He'd never once looked poverty in the face and simply helped. Not without contracts, not without liability protection, not without ensuring he couldn't be exploited. His generosity always had fine print. But that December morning in Lower Manhattan, something cracked in the armor around his chest. He was late for a merger meeting worth $200 million, a deal that would expand Blackstone Technologies into the Asian market and cement his legacy as one of the decade's most successful tech CEOs. His assistant, Patricia Morgan, struggled to keep pace in her stilettos, designer briefcase swinging from her shoulder, phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with the firm's lawyers about last-minute contract revisions. The subway station near Wall Street pulsed with the usual chaos, commuters rushing, vendors calling out, the screech of arriving trains echoing off tile walls. Victor's cashmere overcoat cost $6,000. His phone buzzed relentlessly with messages demanding his attention, his time, his certainty that this deal would close. Then he saw them. Huddled against the cold tile wall near the turnstiles sat a young black woman, maybe late 20s, with exhaustion carved into every line of her face. A little girl no older than 6 slept curled against her mother's chest, wrapped in a threadbare pink jacket clearly meant for a child half her size. The woman's arms were locked around her daughter like a fortress constructed from nothing but desperate maternal love. A piece of cardboard rested beside them. Single mom. Lost everything. Anything helps. God bless. Victor stopped walking. Patricia nearly collided with him, coffee sloshing in her travel mug. Mr. Blackstone, we have exactly 7 minutes. Wait here, he said, his voice distant. He approached slowly, Italian leather shoes clicking against grimy tile. Homeless people were everywhere in New York. This wasn't special. This wasn't different. This was just another casualty of a system he'd helped build. Except when the woman looked up, something in her eyes stopped him cold. No performance. No rehearsed desperation. Just bone-deep exhaustion. The kind that settles into your soul after months of carrying impossible weight alone. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun despite everything. Her fingernails were clean but ragged. She'd surrendered vanity but refused to surrender dignity. Every logical part of Victor's brain screamed to keep walking. His father's warnings echoed like prophecy. Patricia's impatient breathing reminded him of the millions waiting in that conference room. But his body moved forward anyway, pulled by something he couldn't name. Toward this woman, this child, this moment that would change everything. "I'm sorry," she said immediately, her voice rough from cold and disuse. "We're not causing trouble. We can move if we need to. I know we're not supposed to be here." Her apology for existing hit Victor harder than any quarterly loss or failed acquisition ever had. "What's your name?" he asked, shocking himself by kneeling down despite his expensive suit pants touching the filthy subway floor. The woman blinked, clearly stunned that someone in clothing that expensive would acknowledge her existence, let alone kneel. "Monique," she said quietly. "Monique Harris. And your daughter?" Monique's arms instinctively tightened around the sleeping child. Protective. Primal. "Olivia. She just turned 6 last month." Victor studied Monique's face with the same analytical intensity he applied to business deals. Intelligence lived behind that exhaustion, real intelligence. Education showed in the careful way she chose words. This wasn't someone born into poverty. This was someone who'd fallen and couldn't find a handhold on the way down. "How long have you been out here?" Shame flickered across her features. "For months. We were staying with my cousin in the Bronx until September, but she lost her apartment too. New landlord tripled the rent. We've been rotating between here and the shelter on Houston Street when there's space available. For months. A 6-year-old child sleeping on subway floors while millions walked past every single day." Patricia cleared her throat impatiently behind him. "Mr. Blackstone, the Japanese investors are already seated. We really must." Victor raised one hand, silencing her without breaking eye contact with Monique. His father's voice echoed, "The desperate will bleed you dry and smile while doing it." Maybe it was time to test that theory himself. Victor reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. Monique's eyes widened slightly, probably expecting a 20 if she was lucky. Instead, Victor pulled out a sleek black American Express Centurion card, the legendary black card. Platinum edges, raised numbers, no preset spending limit. Pure, unrestricted access to wealth most people couldn't comprehend. Monique stared at it like he'd pulled out a weapon. "Take it," Victor said, holding the card between them like a bridge spanning 2 different worlds. "I don't understand," Monique stammered, pulling Olivia closer. "It's yours for 24 hours, Victor explained, his voice steady despite the chaos of doubt screaming inside his head. "Buy whatever you want. No limits, no questions, no conditions." Monique's hands began trembling. "Sir, this has to be some kind of trick. People don't just hand out credit cards to strangers. Especially not to people like me." "I want to test something my father taught me," Victor interrupted quietly. "Prove him right or prove him wrong. Either way, I'll finally know the truth." He pressed the card into her palm. Her fingers were ice cold, shaking like leaves in a winter storm. "Why me?" Monique whispered, tears pooling in eyes that looked completely empty. "Out of everyone in this city, why would you choose me?" Victor looked at Olivia, sleeping peacefully despite the cold, despite everything. He thought about his own childhood, private schools, summer homes in the Hamptons, every need met before he could articulate it. This child had nothing except a mother who refused to let go. "Because I'm tired of assumptions," Victor said honestly. "Because I want to believe there's still something good left in people who've lost everything. Prove my father right or prove him wrong, Monique." Monique closed her fingers around the card slowly, like someone touching fire for the first time. 24 hours, Victor repeated, standing. "There's no pin. Just sign your name. I'll find you here tomorrow morning. Same time, same place." Patricia looked physically ill. "Mr. Blackstone, this is highly irregular." "No parameters," Victor said firmly. "No protection. Just trust." The word felt foreign. Trust. He'd spent 40 years avoiding it like poison. As he walked away, his father's voice whispered warnings. "She'll drain your account. You're a fool, Victor." But another voice, quieter, more fragile, whispered something different. "What if she doesn't?" Victor didn't sleep that night. His penthouse felt cavernous and cold despite the heating system that cost more than a luxury car. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at Manhattan's glittering skyline, wondering if somewhere down there in those millions of lights, Monique and Olivia were finally warm for the first time in months. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app. The black card was linked directly to his personal account. He could track every single transaction in real time. Every purchase, every location, every choice she made laid bare in digital precision. For hours, nothing. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Still nothing. Why wasn't she spending? Was she afraid? Did she think it was some elaborate trap? Or worse, was she planning something big? Waiting for stores to open, preparing to maximize every possible dollar before the clock ran out? Patricia called 3 times. The merger had collapsed. The Japanese investors were furious. The board demanded explanations. Victor let every call go to voicemail, transfixed by his phone screen, waiting for a notification that refused to come. Across the city, Monique sat against the same cold tile wall, clutching the black card like it might vanish if she loosened her grip. This couldn't be real. People didn't just hand unlimited credit cards to homeless strangers. There had to be cameras, police waiting, some twisted social experiment designed to humiliate desperate people for entertainment. Mama. Olivia stirred awake, rubbing her eyes. What's that? I don't know, baby. Monique's voice cracked. A man gave it to me. Said we could buy things. Like magic. Maybe. Tears burned Monique's eyes. Or maybe like a trap. She thought about her former life, the elementary school classroom in Brooklyn where she'd taught 2nd grade, the small apartment in Queens where Olivia had taken her first steps. The cascade of failures that led here, budget cuts, job loss, eviction, her cousin's landlord, the shelter waitlists that never moved. Olivia shivered, pulling the inadequate jacket tighter. That's what decided it. Even if there were consequences. Even if this was temporary. Even if the man came back angry tomorrow. Her daughter was freezing, and for one night, just one night, Monique could fix that. At 6:23 a.m., she walked into a 24-hour CVS, hands shaking as she handed the card to the cashier. Victor's phone buzzed. Transaction, $37.84 location, 24-hour CVS, downtown Crossing. His pulse spiked. He clicked for details but only saw the amount, not what was purchased. Just numbers. Then another notification. Transaction, $52.19 location, Target, South Bay Center. Then another. Transaction, $28.63 location, Dunkin' Donuts, Canal Street. His chest tightened, not with anger or betrayal, but with something stranger. Anticipation. Curiosity. She was spending, yes, but carefully. Modestly. These weren't the transactions of someone drunk on sudden, unlimited wealth. These weren't purchases of someone planning to drain an account and disappear. These were careful, practical choices. Someone desperately trying to solve immediate problems with what they thought were limited resources, even when those resources weren't actually limited. These were the purchases of someone desperately practical. By 8:47 a.m., Victor couldn't wait anymore. He called his driver, ignoring Patricia's frantic texts about emergency board meetings and investor lawsuits. I don't care, Victor said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. Cancel everything. I need to go back to that subway station. Mr. Blackstone. Now. He had to know. Had to see. Had to understand what $118.66 meant when you had nothing. Victor told his driver to stop 3 blocks from the subway station. He needed to walk. Needed to feel the cold December air biting his face. Needed to remember what the city actually felt like when you weren't insulated by wealth, by heated cars and private elevators and temperature-controlled everything. His heart raced as he approached the station entrance. Monique was exactly where he'd left her, sitting against the same cold tile wall. But everything else had changed. Olivia was awake now, sitting beside her mother, wearing a brand new purple winter coat with a fur-lined hood. Her hair had been brushed, pulled back with a small butterfly clip that caught the fluorescent light. She clutched a stuffed giraffe, hugging it close while she colored in a fresh coloring book with crayons that still smelled like the package. Monique saw Victor approaching and immediately stood, the credit card already in her trembling hand. "I was going to return it," she said quickly, panic edging her voice. "I promise I was. I just needed to get a few things first. Basic things. Necessary things." "Keep it," Victor said gently, raising both hands. "You still have hours left." Monique's shoulders sagged with something between relief and confusion. "I don't understand you." "That makes two of us," Victor admitted. He knelt down to Olivia's level, careful not to startle her. "That's a nice giraffe. What's her name?" Olivia hugged the toy tighter, shy but smiling. "Sunny," she whispered. "Like sunshine." Victor's throat tightened with emotion he couldn't explain. He looked up at Monique. "What else did you buy?" Monique hesitated, then slowly pulled 2 crumpled receipts from her pocket and handed them over like evidence in a trial she was certain to lose. Victor scanned the first receipt. Children's winter coat size 6, children's boots waterproof, socks 3-pack, children's underwear pack of 7, stuffed giraffe toy, coloring books, crayons, children's Tylenol, children's multivitamins, Band-Aids, and Neosporin. His throat tightened. Every single item was for Olivia. Not one thing for herself. The second receipt showed groceries. Bread, peanut butter, granola bars, apples, juice boxes, crackers, string cheese, a gallon of milk. And at the bottom, something that made his breath catch. Houston Street Women's Shelter, general donation, $100. He looked up sharply. "You donated money?" Monique's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "The shelter on Houston Street. They've helped us when they could. They're always full, always running out of supplies. I thought if I had extra, even just for one day, maybe I could help them help someone else." "Someone else," Victor repeated, his voice barely functional. "You're homeless. You've been sleeping on subway floors for 4 months, and you gave money to help other people. There are women there with babies," Monique said quietly. "With teenagers. With disabilities. Some of them have it so much worse than we do. I know what it's like to need help and have nowhere to turn. If I could give back even a little, even for one day, I had to." Victor stared at the receipts, his father's voice completely silent now, obliterated by truth printed on thermal paper. This woman who had every reason to be selfish, who had every justification to think only of herself and her daughter, had spent a billionaire's money on necessities, medicine, and charity. Not one penny on herself. Just survival. Just kindness. Just love. For the first time in his life, Victor Blackstone felt genuinely small. Not in wealth or power, but in character, in humanity, in basic human decency. This homeless single mother had more grace in her roughened fingertips than he'd cultivated in 40 years of privilege. "Come with me," Victor said suddenly, the words tumbling out before his brain could catch up. Monique blinked. "What? Both of you? Come with me. Please." Fear flickered in Monique's eyes. "Where?" Victor's voice broke slightly. "Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can finally stop running." Tears spilled down Monique's cheeks. She looked at Olivia, coloring peacefully with her new crayons, then at this stranger who'd handed her unlimited wealth and asked for nothing in return. For the first time in 4 months, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, not everyone in the world was cruel. "Okay," she whispered. Victor didn't take them to his penthouse. That felt too invasive, too overwhelming. Instead, he booked a corner suite at the St. Regis. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in actual sunlight instead of harsh fluorescent subway glare. Monique stood in the doorway, frozen, unable to cross the threshold. Her body had learned that good things were temporary, that hope was dangerous, that safety was an illusion that could shatter at any moment. "It's okay," Victor said gently. "This is yours for as long as you need it. No conditions, no expectations, no strings attached. Just safety." Olivia, unburdened by adult disbelief and trauma, ran inside immediately. Her new boots squeaked on polished hardwood floors. She touched everything with wide-eyed wonder. The velvet couch, the heavy silk curtains, the crystal bowl of fresh fruit on the marble counter. "Mama, look," Olivia called from the bathroom doorway. "There's a bathtub, a really big one, like in the movies." Monique finally stepped inside, moving like someone walking through a dream that might shatter if she breathed too hard. She set down the plastic bag that held literally everything she owned. everything that remained of her previous life compressed into one torn shopping bag, and turned to Victor with tears streaming freely down her face. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "Why are you doing this? What do you want from us?" Victor had been asked that question 1,000 times in business. People always wanted to know his angle, his strategy, his hidden agenda. Everyone had ulterior motives in his world. Everyone wanted something. But standing there, watching a mother see safety for the first time in months, he realized he didn't have an agenda. He just had a choice. "You reminded me what money is actually for," he said quietly. "I'd forgotten. Or maybe I never knew." Monique walked over to where Olivia was pressing buttons on the TV remote, delighted by every channel that appeared like magic. She knelt down and wrapped her arms around her daughter, holding her like she'd been afraid to hold her too tightly before, as if hope itself might break under the weight of wanting it too much. "You need to rest," Victor said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't name. "Order room service. Take a real bath. Sleep in an actual bed. I'll come back tomorrow morning." Monique looked up, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. "Tomorrow morning? What happens then?" "We figure out the next steps," Victor said. "Housing, employment, school for Olivia, healthcare, childcare, stability. None of this has to be temporary. Unless you want it to be." Monique stared at him like he was speaking a language she'd forgotten existed. "You're serious?" "Completely." "We're strangers," Monique said, shaking her head. "We're nobody. We're just two people who got unlucky and couldn't climb back out." Victor corrected her gently, his voice soft but firm. "You were nobody. Now you're someone I care about. Now you matter. Now you have someone who won't let you fall again." Monique opened her mouth to argue, to protest, to explain all the reasons this couldn't be real. But exhaustion won. For months of hypervigilance, of sleeping with one eye open, of constant fear came crashing down. She sank onto the velvet couch, her body folding like someone who'd been holding up the sky and could finally let it rest on something stronger. "Thank you," she whispered, and the words carried the weight of 4 months of suffering compressed into 2 syllables. Victor nodded, his throat too tight to speak. As he left the suite, he heard Olivia's delighted laughter echoing behind him. Pure, uninhibited joy at discovering a refrigerator full of food and a bed that was actually hers. And Victor Blackstone realized he was smiling. Not the calculated, camera-ready smile he used in boardrooms, but something genuine, something human, something his face had almost forgotten how to do. That evening, Olivia slept in a real bed for the first time in 4 months. Sprawled across soft sheets with Sunny the giraffe tucked under her arm, her small body finally relaxed in genuine safety. Monique and Victor sat in the living room, coffee from room service growing cold between them. The city lights twinkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that cost more per night than Monique used to make in a month. "What happened?" Victor asked quietly, the question he'd been holding back all day. "How did you end up at that subway station?" Monique's hands tightened around her coffee cup. Shame, pain, and exhaustion flickered across her face like shadows. "You don't have to tell me," Victor added quickly. "But if you wanna, I'm listening." Monique was silent for a long moment. Then she began. "I was an elementary school teacher in Brooklyn. 2nd grade. I loved it, loved the kids, loved watching them discover reading, loved making a difference." Her voice grew softer. "Olivia's father, Marcus, left when I found out I was pregnant. Never met his daughter. Never sent a single dollar." She stared into her coffee. "But I managed. For 5 years, I managed. Small apartment in Queens, daycare I could barely afford, budget so tight I knew every penny. But we were stable. We were okay." "What changed?" Victor asked gently. "School budget cuts." The words came out bitter. "Lost my teaching position along with 30 other teachers. I applied everywhere, every school in the city, in New Jersey, in Connecticut. But the market was oversaturated. Too many qualified teachers, not enough positions. The cascade had been swift and merciless. Retail work that paid half what teaching did. Office temp jobs with no benefits, no stability, no certainty. The rent she could no longer cover. 3 months of falling behind while juggling daycare costs and choosing between groceries and utilities. "They evicted us in May," Monique said, her voice barely above a whisper. I moved in with my cousin Janelle in the Bronx. Promised her it was temporary. Promised I'd find something soon. But Janelle had been struggling too, single income, 2 kids of her own, barely making ends meet in an apartment that was already too small. In September, Janelle's building was sold. New landlord tripled the rent overnight. She had to move to a smaller place, 1 bedroom for her and both her kids. There was no room for us. Tears streamed silently down Monique's face. I applied for shelter services. The wait list was months long. I tried every social service agency in the city. Either we didn't qualify, or there was no space, or the paperwork took weeks we didn't have. For months of rotating between subway stations and the rare nights when the Houston Street shelter had space. For months of keeping Olivia as clean as possible in public library bathrooms. For months of spending days in fast food restaurants for warmth, buying a single coffee and nursing it for hours. For months of sleeping in subway stations because they were marginally less dangerous than the streets. I kept Olivia in school as long as I could, Monique said, her voice breaking. Used Janelle's address. But eventually they figured it out. No permanent address means no enrollment. The constant vigilance had been the worst part. Never sleeping deeply. Always alert for danger. Watching her bright, curious daughter slowly compress under the weight of instability. Watching the light dim in eyes that should have been full of wonder. Every night I thought, what kind of mother can't keep a roof over her child's head? Monique wiped her eyes. What kind of mother lets her baby sleep on concrete? Victor listened in stunned silence, his privilege and assumptions and ignorance crashing down around him like glass. He'd thought homelessness was something that happened to other people. People who made bad choices, people who were fundamentally different. He'd never realized how close everyone was to catastrophe, how one job loss, one medical emergency, one stroke of bad luck could send anyone spiraling. I thought homeless people were. Victor struggled for words. I don't know. Different. Like homelessness was a character flaw instead of a circumstance. Monique's smile was gentle, sad, understanding. Most people think that. Until it happens to them. I'm sorry, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. For my assumptions. For walking past people like you for 40 years. For building a system that failed you so completely. You stopped, Monique said softly. That's more than most people ever do. Victor looked at this woman, this intelligent, capable, loving woman who'd been failed by every safety net that should have caught her, and made a quiet vow. I'm not walking past anymore, he said. Not you, not anyone. The next morning, Victor arrived at the hotel suite with fresh coffee and a bag of warm pastries from a bakery 3 blocks away. Olivia sat at the table drawing elaborate pictures of giraffes and butterflies, Sunny positioned carefully beside her like a creative supervisor. Monique looked transformed. Not in appearance, she still wore the same worn clothes, but in posture, in the way she held her shoulders, in the fragile hope that had replaced the perpetual fear in her eyes. I worked on something last night, Victor said, setting down the coffee. A plan. If you're interested. He laid it out systematically, the way his mind naturally organized complex problems into actionable solutions. A 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood near excellent public schools. Job training programs specifically matched to her teaching background. Pathways back to certification or into education administration. Comprehensive healthcare coverage for both of them, with immediate dental and medical checkups scheduled. Olivia enrolled in 1st grade at a top-rated public school with before and after care programs so Monique could work. Initial financial support with a clear pathway to full independence within 18 months. This isn't charity, Victor emphasized, meeting Monique's eyes. It's an investment. You're intelligent, capable, resilient. You just need a foundation to rebuild from. A place to stand so you can start climbing again. Tears ran down Monique's face, dripping into coffee that had grown cold while Victor talked. I don't know how to repay you, she whispered. You already did, Victor said. You showed me that goodness still exists in people. That desperation doesn't automatically create monsters. That my father was wrong about everything that actually matters. Monique shook her head. I just bought what Olivia needed. Exactly, Victor leaned forward. You had unlimited wealth for 24 hours and chose love over greed. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How many people would have drained that card buying things for themselves and walked away without looking back? He pulled out his phone, showed her the receipt image he'd saved. This donation to the shelter. This is what moved me most. You could have taken everything, but you gave anyway. That's not just good, Monique. That's extraordinary. That afternoon, Victor's hired real estate agent took them apartment hunting. Olivia's excitement was contagious, running from room to room in each place they viewed. Is this where we'll live, Mama? Can this be my room? Look, there's a playground. They found it on the third viewing, third floor of a well-maintained building in a quiet neighborhood. 2 bedrooms, small balcony, hardwood floors that creaked in friendly ways. Not luxury, laminate counters, builder-grade carpet in the bedrooms, but clean, safe, and theirs. When the agent handed Monique the keys, she broke down completely, sinking to the floor of the empty living room with sobs that came from somewhere deep and raw. Olivia didn't understand the tears. She just ran through the empty rooms, her voice echoing with pure joy. This is my room, Mama. Mine. With a door that closes and a window and everything. They met the neighbors within an hour. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door brought over homemade empanadas, welcoming them warmly. The building's superintendent, Jose, explained garbage days, showed them the laundry room in the basement, helped them figure out the mailbox system. It was the small things, the normal, everyday interactions, that made Monique's chest ache. This feeling of belonging, of being part of a community instead of invisible, instead of something people stepped around and tried not to see. Victor watched her transformation throughout the day, from hunted to human, from someone just trying to survive to someone who could imagine a future again. That night, after Victor left and the movers he'd hired had delivered basic furniture, Monique stood in the living room while Olivia slept peacefully in her own bed. Her own bed, in her own room, with her own door. This is real, Monique whispered to the empty room, tears streaming down her face. This is really real. Through the window, the city lights twinkled like promises. Tomorrow, Olivia would start school. Tomorrow, Monique would begin her training program. Tomorrow, they would wake up somewhere safe. For the first time in 4 months, tomorrow felt like possibility instead of threat. 3 months later, Monique completed her workforce development program with honors, top of her class in education administration and instructional support. She landed a position as a teacher's aide at Olivia's elementary school. Full benefits, regular hours, a pathway back to full teaching certification within 2 years. Every morning, she walked Olivia to school, then stayed to work in the same building. Every afternoon, they walked home together, Olivia chattering about friends and art projects and playground games. The weight of homelessness had lifted from Olivia's small shoulders. She brought home artwork that covered the refrigerator. She had playdates. She laughed without that edge of fear that had shadowed her for 4 months. Monthly routines became beautifully mundane. Rent paid on time, bills organized in a folder, grocery shopping on Saturdays. Normal life. Gloriously, wonderfully normal life. Victor became a constant presence, not as a benefactor checking on his investment, but as a friend. He attended Olivia's fall school festival, where she dressed as a butterfly and sang off-key, but with complete confidence. He helped when the kitchen sink started leaking at midnight, arriving with a plumber he'd called personally. He showed up on difficult days without being asked, somehow knowing when Monique needed someone to talk to. Sometimes he brought dinner, not from expensive restaurants, but home-cooked meals he'd made himself. Simple pasta, roasted chicken, things he was learning to prepare in his suddenly too large penthouse kitchen. He was learning things about himself. That simple meals around a small kitchen table satisfied more than Michelin-starred restaurants ever had. That Olivia's laughter when he helped with her homework was better than any boardroom applause. That meaning didn't come from acquiring more. It came from giving what you had to people who needed it. Victor couldn't stop thinking about the Houston Street Women's Shelter. He visited with Monique one Saturday, meeting the director, Teresa Williams, an exhausted woman in her 50s who'd been running the shelter for 15 years on a shoestring budget and pure determination. The need was staggering. Overcrowded, underfunded, turning away families every single night because there simply wasn't space. Victor met other women like Monique. Keisha, a former nurse with 3 kids, who'd lost everything after medical bankruptcy from her daughter's leukemia treatment. Sarah, a veteran with PTSD who couldn't hold steady employment and had slipped through every crack in the system. Brilliant, capable women destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. These aren't statistics, Victor said quietly to Monique as they left. These are people. These are Monique's. Women who just needed one person to see them, to help them stand back up. Late that night, sitting in Monique's small living room while Olivia slept, Victor couldn't contain the thought that had been building for weeks. One person, he said suddenly. I helped one person. But there are thousands out there. Tens of thousands. You can't save everyone, Victor, Monique said gently. But what if I could save more? Victor leaned forward, his words coming faster. What if this, he gestured around the modest apartment, wasn't one-time luck but a system, something sustainable, scalable? You're talking about a foundation, Monique said. I'm talking about changing how wealth works, Victor corrected. Not traditional charity with degrading applications and bureaucratic barriers, but direct intervention. Finding families on the edge, providing immediate stability, housing, healthcare, job training, childcare. Everything you needed but couldn't access. Monique stared at him. That would cost millions. I have billions, Victor said simply. What's the point of all that money if it just sits there earning more money? You taught me that, Monique. With those receipts. With that shelter donation. Money is supposed to mean something. At Blackstone Technologies, Patricia Morgan watched her boss with growing fascination. She'd been initially horrified by Victor's reckless charity, handing a credit card to a homeless stranger, canceling crucial meetings, risking everything for people he didn't know. But over 3 months, she'd watched him transform. He was present now, engaged, purposeful in ways she'd never seen. In board meetings, he pushed for corporate social responsibility initiatives that actually helped people instead of just generating positive press. You're different now, Patricia said one afternoon, reviewing foundation proposals in his office. Less hollow. Victor looked up from the documents, smiled. I'm finally doing something that matters. Victor sat in his attorney's office, surrounded by lawyers and financial advisors, outlining his plan for a major foundation. $500 million initial endowment. Comprehensive family stability programs. Direct intervention without bureaucratic barriers. And the director? His lead attorney asked. Monique Harris, Victor said without hesitation. Monique's name kept coming up in every conversation, every planning session. I want her involved from the beginning. She understands what families need because she needed it. She knows the system's failures because she lived them. His attorney made notes. This is ambitious, Mr. Blackstone. It could change thousands of lives. Victor thought about that December morning in the subway station. About receipts for children's coats and shelter donations. About a woman who chose love over greed when given unlimited wealth. That's exactly the point, he said quietly. It's time to change some lives. 2 years later, Victor stood at a podium in a grand ballroom filled with hundreds of people. Investors, journalists, philanthropists, politicians. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over faces waiting to hear what the tech billionaire had summoned them to witness. 2 years ago, Victor began, his voice steady, I gave my credit card to a homeless single mother in a subway station and walked away. The room went silent. A homeless single mother taught me what wealth is actually for, he continued. My father spent his life teaching me that the poor would destroy me if I let them close. That desperation breeds thieves. That trust was for fools. He paused, letting the words settle. So I tested his theory. I handed my black card, unlimited spending, no restrictions, to a woman who'd been sleeping on subway floors for 4 months with her 6-year-old daughter. 24 hours. No conditions. I wanted to prove my father right. Victor pulled out his phone, displayed an image of 2 crumpled receipts on the screen behind him. She spent $118.66, he said quietly. A children's winter coat. Boots. Basic necessities. Not 1 penny on herself. And at the bottom of that receipt, a $100 donation to the homeless shelter that had helped her. A woman with nothing gave to people she thought had less. Many in the audience were crying now, not bothering to hide it. That's why I'm honored to announce the Blackstone Foundation for Family Stability, comprehensive support for single parents facing homelessness, emergency housing, job training, childcare, healthcare, education support. No degrading applications, no bureaucratic barriers. Just help extended with dignity. $500 million from my personal wealth to start. The room erupted in applause. Victor waited for silence, then gestured to the front row where Monique sat in a simple blue dress she'd bought with her own paycheck, holding 8-year-old Olivia's hand. And I'm honored to announce our foundation director will be Monique Harris. The audience gasped. Monique's eyes went wide with shock. This wasn't just being on the board. Victor had asked her about that months ago. This was everything. Director. The person who would oversee all programs, all hiring, all family services. A salary that meant she'd never worry about rent again. A platform to help hundreds, thousands of families. Monique stood on shaking legs, tears streaming down her face. No one understands what families need better than someone who's been there, Victor said, his voice thick with emotion. Who survived. Who stayed good when the world gave every reason to be bitter. After the press conference, reporters swarmed with questions and camera flashes. But Victor navigated through the crowd, searching. He found Monique and Olivia outside by the fountain, away from the chaos. Olivia hugged him fiercely, her thin arms surprisingly strong. Mr. Victor, does this mean Mama's going to help lots of families like you helped us? Victor knelt to her level, just like he had that first morning in the subway station. Yes, sweetheart. Your mom is going to help so many families. Olivia beamed, her entire face lighting up. Good, because Mama's the best. Everyone should have a mama like mine. Monique and Victor both started crying, laughing through tears, overwhelmed by the beautiful simplicity of a child's love. They walked through Manhattan together afterward, the three of them, past busy streets and glittering storefronts, past the life Victor had known before everything changed. They walked past the subway station where they'd met. Someone new sat where Monique once had, a young man, maybe 25, with a handwritten cardboard sign and defeat in his eyes. Victor stopped, pulled out his wallet, handed the man his business card. Call this number tomorrow, Victor said gently. We can help. The man stared at the card like it might disappear. Monique squeezed Victor's hand, understanding flooding between them without words. They weren't walking past anymore. Either of them. That evening, Victor stood alone in his penthouse overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. The space no longer felt empty. It felt filled with purpose, with meaning, with something his father had never understood. Richard Blackstone had been wrong about everything. Trust wasn't weakness, it was strength. The poor weren't dangerous, they were human. Capable of extraordinary love, remarkable resilience, stunning generosity when given the smallest opportunity. Monique had taught him that with receipts for children's coats and shelter donations. She'd broken his heart open in the best possible way. His phone buzzed. A text from Monique. A photo, Olivia asleep in her bed, her own bed in her own room, Sonny the giraffe tucked beside her. The caption read, "Thank you for seeing us when we were invisible. Thank you for proving not everyone is cruel. Thank you for giving us more than shelter. You gave us hope. Forever grateful. M." Victor saved the photo, stared at it until his vision blurred with tears. He realized he'd been searching his entire life for this feeling. Not more money. Not more power. Not more success. Just purpose. Just the knowledge that his existence made someone else's life better. Monique had given him that. The test he'd designed for her had actually been a test for himself. And he'd finally, miraculously passed. As Victor stood at his penthouse window overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, he understood something his father never did. Wealth without compassion is just numbers. Power without purpose is just noise. The richest thing a person can own isn't money. It's the ability to look someone in the eyes and say, "I see you. You matter. I'll help you stand." That December morning, he'd given Monique a credit card. But she'd given him something infinitely more valuable. She'd given him back his humanity. And for that, he would be grateful for the rest of his life. The end.
Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. But don't let it be the last one. If this moment meant something to you, take a second to like the video, subscribe to Nell's Haven, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. We'd also love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you have done with that card? And if this story moved you, the next one might move you even more. Click the video on your screen and keep watching, because the stories ahead are filled with hope, faith, and powerful reminders of who we're meant to be. See you there.